Hi everybody, welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD of Arrows Group, where I'm interviewing CTOs, thought leaders, heads of talent within the technology space, really asking them a bit about their story, thoughts on emerging technology and what excites them, interests them at the moment, and that all-important career advice for our STEM listeners. So really happy to have Peter Donlon on the show today. Peter is the CTO of Moonpig, and we were just having a joke about this. I think Moonpig, who doesn't know the brand, it's one that I think we have all used. But how do you explain them? And I think being a leading technology online gift business, but the tech behind it, I think anyone who knows just the sort of volume and what you have to do to really be a market leader in this space. They really are a technology first business. So I'm pretty excited about our conversation today. So without further ado, Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Charlie. It's a pleasure to be here. And thanks for the kind intro.
Yeah, well, my pleasure. Like I say, Moonpig, I think the name alone is so unique. It's probably one of the best marketing creations out there.
Yeah, and I won't sing the jingle. I think that's the other thing. Everywhere I go, I hear that. So I'll save you that today.
Yeah, I could only imagine. So let's jump straight in though, because yeah, you've risen the ranks and now a CTO of a really well-established business. And so tell us a bit about your story, how you got into it, and a bit about your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if we start at the beginning, so I've always had an interest in technology and sort of STEM in general, to be honest, from being a small child, of taking everything apart to see how it works. Never been able to put things back together again, but certainly take them apart, through to then sort of getting interested in computers and starting to dabble in programming from quite a young age, mainly kind of web stuff, and sort of in the earlier years of the internet and playing around doing things there. And I guess as I sort of got a bit older, and it was a great way to make a little bit of money on the side as well. There weren't so many kind of big agencies and consultancies and things about then, so it was a nice way to make a bit of pocket money versus the paper round or something that required me to get out of bed early in the morning. So from that point of view, it was pretty good, and that sparked my interest. And I think the other thing I always liked was video games. So I sort of convinced myself I was going to be a video game creator. And I went to university and I studied computer games technology. That was what was going to get me into that. So that was really good. Obviously learned a huge amount. But then I think as I got towards the end of that course, there was a couple of realizations. And I think one of them was I've always been quite an ambitious person. I've always wanted to, do well. I don't need to be a billionaire, but it'd be nice to do well. And I realized there wasn't very much money in the games industry. You had to work incredibly hard, but it wasn't that well financially rewarding. I'm sure there are lots of other rewards, and I do still envy people who work on some of these top games, but. So I'd done more and more of kind of the more web focused things, and realized that was a good direction for me to take, and worked through a number of startups to start with, which was really good learning for me, because I think you got to apply what you'd learned pretty quickly, maybe a little bit lower pressure in some ways. So when you're working for a startup, one of the great sides of it is that things are moving really fast and you can try new things. The flip side is quite often not very many people use your products. But the good side of that is it's a bit easier to get away with mistakes. So when you're early in your career and you do make a lot of mistakes, then that was always sort of a good learning. But I think for me, I very quickly fell into tech leadership roles. I don't know whether I'd sit here and say I always had an aspiration of that, or a particular passion for it, but it just kind of happened, and I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed sort of reading about how to do it better, and practicing and trying, and certainly in a field that has evolved a lot. when I was starting out, sort of agile was just becoming this sort of thing within tech. So it was kind of like starting to learn about that and how you can apply it. And over the years, just sort of learning more and more. So yeah, I worked my way through a few startups, and one of them ended up being bought by Sainsbury's, which again, another brand that I think most people listening will know. And that was a really interesting sort of point for me in my career, because I quite enjoyed all these startups and this fast pace and everything. And I hadn't really thought about working for one of these big companies. It's kind of a different beast to be part of. But really inspiring CIO at the time had joined and kind of convinced me that this could be something different. This could be something interesting. And Sainsbury's was just going through a change at the time, from probably more traditional retailer to actually this point on every business is starting to realize the value of tech. So wanted to build up its capability, and I was given the opportunity to get involved in that. So over the following years, I built up the tech team there, and loads of learning. Going from a sort of a team of nothing to a team of, I can't remember what we got to, but sort of 400-500, I think it was. There aren't many books that tell you how to run an engineering team of that size. And actually, I'm not convinced from speaking to plenty of people in the industry that there are that many models of how it just works. I think everyone's always changing as one of the things you learn. But it was great. It was a great experience working on lots of really high profile, high impacting projects. Obviously Sainsbury's has millions of customers, and that was really, really interesting. But one of the things I missed there was probably the breadth. I'd got very focused into engineering, but actually, broader technology interests me, and that's when the sort of Moonpig opportunity came along. And for one, Moonpig was and is a really well-known brand, and that was really appealing to me. I think it's nice working for a company that, when you tell someone who you work for, they're like, oh yeah, I know who they are. I sent a card with them 2 weeks ago. I always call it the mum test. Does my mum know who I work for, and does she understand what they do?
Yeah.
Right. Like that's always been something for me, and Moonpig certainly checked that box. But I think what was really interesting is it was a high growth business, but probably had some work to do in technology, and I like that kind of challenge. I think going into something that's perfect and polished and finished probably wouldn't be that interesting for me. And where it was when I joined just over 3 years ago, there was some work to do. So over the past few years, it's been really, really fulfilling for me. We've massively expanded the team from about 30 to sort of near 150 across different technology disciplines. And we've had a massive replatforming of a lot of our technology, which again has been really interesting. And all while that's been happening, the business has been growing a lot and got to a really interesting scale now. I think last year we sold about 46 million cards, I think it was.
Wow.
And if you think about that in terms of sort of what you have to do from a tech point of view. So, we've got a platform where we want to make it as easy as possible for people to send, the best card and a gift with that. But then, we need to then translate that to something in the real world. And I think that's been really interesting for me as well. Is like, how do you do that? And I think something that's really unique about what Moonpig does compared to a lot of other online retailers is, every one of those cards is different. It's not like we have an inventory of, well, I'm picking this particular product off of a shelf. It's no, every single one of those is different, because maybe you personalize the outside of it. Maybe you probably personalize the inside of it, writing a different message. So that's a whole different problem space. And that's really interesting. That gives you something to really think about. And then in recent times, getting a lot more stuck into the data. We have a really rich data set, and starting to look at what we can do with that as well. And certainly when we think about like machine learning and AI, which like I always love the sort of new stuff, and I'm sure we'll touch on some of it in a bit. But I think it's just been a really good sort of learning journey for me. And most recently, kind of, I suppose, on a more personal level, corporate level, is we also floated the business on the London Stock Exchange, which again, massive learning for me. There's very different requirements to be in a public business, to be in a private business. So again, like from a tech point of view, learning kind of what you need to do and how you get yourself set up for that has been super interesting as well. So yeah, I think from start to now, the constant has been I've always been interested in technology. I'm still interested in technology. Now I'm probably equally as interested in people and leadership and that side of it as well. But certainly that technology spark hasn't gone away.
Yeah, and that's so evident to see. And what I loved about that, as you said, is you had a passion for gaming, you studied it, but actually you're able to use that and then define a career and realize where you want to go. And I think the other lovely thing about working for startups, you can also test what you want to do as much as what you don't want to do, can't you? And you shouldn't be afraid to try something and then change path or alter it rather than feel committed to one journey the entire time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about the tech industry is there is so much variety there now. And I think as almost every business becomes a tech business in some form, it means you can start to focus on the things that actually you enjoy. It's not just a job. It's not just I have a skill set and I do this job. It's actually, what is the domain? Am I passionate about this domain? And I think that makes a big difference to your motivation to get up in the morning and actually do that job.
Yeah. And again, I couldn't agree with you more. And so, yeah, let's move on to think about technology. And you touched on it because it's something I'm personally passionate about. Data with machine learning, AI and cyber as well. I should probably, for me, I call it the disruptive technologies, or it's the emerging world. And I can imagine Moonpig and with your passion in that. Are you? Does AI, is that becoming a big thing for you now? Is it something you guys play with, or something you personally look at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a big thing for us, but it's probably also where our biggest opportunity is as well. So I'm certainly not going to sit here and say we're done.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, if you think about sort of our product, you've got someone coming to our website with, or our app with, high intent, right? So they want to buy for a particular occasion. And ultimately, you want to do that as a customer as quickly as possible, but also you want to put a lot of thought into it as well. You want to send something nice. And really, what we're looking at is the personalization around that journey and how we can use AI and machine learning to make that as easy as possible, as frictionless as possible, but at the same time not lose the personal touch. So that starts from, one of our key features, which I think a lot of people love, is reminders. So you can set a reminder for someone's, birthday, anniversary, whatever it is. It's certainly key for me because otherwise I would remember nothing.
Yeah.
Um, but off the back of that reminder, how can we then trigger the easiest possible journey to get you to where you want to be checked out with the product that you want? And actually, the more we learn about you, and almost more importantly, the recipient, and that's something interesting with our business. If you think about like Amazon's a good example where if you think about how they do recommendations. So let's say you go onto Amazon and you buy a tennis racket, and you're actually buying it as a gift for a friend. For the next 6 months, you're going to get recommendations for tennis balls and tennis hats and tennis shoes, even though you have zero interest in tennis. That's because Amazon doesn't differentiate between you being the recipient of the product or not. Whereas for us, we know it's for someone else. And because of that, we can build really bespoke recommendations and personalizations around that. And again, the more we learn about you and your recipient, the better we can service that need, as long as you've got the right product range as well. And that's the other side where kind of the AI side of it comes in as well. Is starting to learn where are the gaps, and actually, you and a friend, maybe you've got an in joke around Star Wars or something, and it's like, let's make sure we have that perfect card for that time as well. So it's some really interesting stuff we can do that, especially around recommendations and personalization. And I think some of the things we will be starting to look at. So we have quite a lot of photo upload cards where you can upload a photo. well, actually, can I place that image for you? Can I optimize it for you?
Yeah.
Can I put it on 100 cards and show you them so you can see what it would look like rather than you having to go through and doing that? A feature we've been playing with, but we've still got a lot of work to keep improving it, is actually suggested messages. A lot of people struggle to think what to write.
Yeah.
I'm certainly one of them. Like, what
Yeah.
should I write? So at the moment, you do actually, within our app, you get suggested some messages, but can we make that even smarter? Can we make that work in a way that it follows the tone of language you would use based on messages you've written before? So there's so many cool things we can do with AI and machine learning, and we are doing, but these things do take time.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's it. It is a time thing as well, isn't it? It's ever evolving, but I can definitely see how you've got to keep testing what works and then evolving it. And I guess thinking about our listeners, and many of them, would have now started studying data scientists, being a data engineer, whereas when we were at university, that probably wasn't, so much a module that we would have learned. When you're looking at your team and the future of the team, where do you see the biggest growth areas within tech? Is it still within software engineering, or do you think actually data may become a bigger area?
Yeah, great question. I think, I mean, so I see software engineering as kind of a staple now. That there's going to be a demand for software engineering probably forevermore, and it probably keeps growing as more companies want software engineers to build their software. There's going to be a demand, so I think that's kind of a safe bet. I think where we're seeing the most growth, definitely one of them is the data side of it, and data science, but also data engineering. A data scientist can only be as effective as the data sets they've got access to, and the platforms behind that. And that's where, one of the areas we invested in first was building out a really solid data platform, and we needed a data engineering team to do that, so that our data scientists could work on it. So I do think there's growth in those areas. But then also I think security is probably one of the other areas, cybersecurity, that are kind of growing the most, and actually are genuinely interesting. And again, there's some overlaps with engineering, there's some overlaps with data science, but if you think for a business like ours, with the amount of customers we've got, the amount of personalized cards that are created, how personal that is to people, we have a real responsibility on us to keep that safe.
Yeah.
So again, that's a growing area where we really do invest, and I think a lot of businesses are seeing the same thing. I mean, so many breaches from other companies have been so public, and it's a real big deal nowadays. So it's really important that we all keep our customers' data safe. So again, I think that's probably the other one. So between those two, there's definitely a lot of growth in those kind of roles.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. When I can look at it from the market perception, and it's a similar trend. And I think what's really interesting, especially around the cyber side, and again, when I'm speaking at universities and people ask me about cyber, and should they work for consultancies or end clients, and traditionally cyber was a consultancy, and then many end clients would outsource their security through either lack of knowledge, or not wanting to be accountable or trust that someone else can do it. But I don't know if it's the same for you, but I've seen a moving trend now where the end clients, the end businesses, are wanting to actually bring that a little bit more in-house and at least have a decent level of control. They may still outsource the SOC centers, or the sort of the day-to-day. Do you see that as well? Where does your preference sit when you're
Yeah.
looking at your cyber strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think there's been a shift to having at least some in-house capability, and I think it's for a few reasons. I think as it's become a more prevalent and more pressing concern, I think having a bit more control over it is it has become an important priority for businesses. And there's also the concept of shifting security left as well. So bringing it earlier into your process, because ultimately it's the new products you build, develop, where you're possibly going to introduce risk. So the earlier you can engage security in that, the earlier you can capture any potential risks and sort them out before they become a problem. That's, in my opinion, a lot easier to do with your own teams working really closely together. and they get to understand your business better as well. I think that's the other thing. I do think there are still some things where it makes sense to use external. You touched on a couple of them. Then things like it. I think it's just diligent to have external pen testing capability. For example, it's great to have that internal, so you can continually do it. But having someone who's just independent of you and can verify what you're doing is right and you've done it well, that's important. And there are some things like running your 24-hour sort of operations side of it. For every business, it's not going to be possible to have 10 people sat in a room doing that. So there definitely are some things where outsource still makes perfect sense. But yeah, broadly, I think there's a lot of capability that you can get in-house now, which will add a lot of value to the business.
Yeah. Well, this has been really interesting, and it's great actually to hear from a business that's living it right now. As we were talking, AI, the future. Now, you've still said you've got a long way to go, but you're on the journey, and to see how that's evolving. And again, for people entering the market or their first jobs now, and we'll move on to ask you a bit about advice you can give to our listeners, because the world is changing, is rapidly changing, isn't it? And I think even within software engineering, again, when I started in this industry, we probably had 3 or 4 development languages, and you needed to become an expert within one of those, and that was going to be your sort of career. And now with polyglot engineering and with more languages being sort of created on a daily basis, it feels it's a different mindset completely from people entering the market. So I guess leading on to that, for you, Peter, what would be the 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would give a graduate, either if you were to interview them or if they're looking at getting into the industry?
Yeah, great question. I think probably the first one touches on something I was saying before about kind of the passion side of it. Like the domain is important. I think it's easy to sort of rush to any opportunity is a good opportunity, but I genuinely think you've got to have passion about the thing you're going to do. And whereas maybe when we were coming into the industry, that wasn't so possible because there wasn't as many jobs about, etc. Now there is such a breadth out there that I think it's worth having a look around. And what I wouldn't say is go and look for the perfect opportunity, because that's not always going to be possible. But make sure that you're not just going to do something for the sake of doing it, or if you are, that it's a step to get you to where you want to be. I think that's really important. I think my next one would be based on what you were just saying, really, which is I think there is such a breadth of technology now. It's really quickly changing. Don't worry about that. That's not a problem you actually have to worry about. What you'll learn in university will give you the foundations of good engineering, good technical skills, and actually then your ability to learn is what really matters at that point. And if I'm interviewing a graduate to come and work for us, what I'm really asking you about is what's your attitude towards learning? If I ask you the question, okay, you get stuck on a problem, how are you going to solve it? I want to hear things like, well, I'm going to ask someone. It's amazing how rare that is as a statement, but that's absolutely what I want you to do. There's nothing wrong with that. Having great problem solving skills is wonderful, and it's a great great capability to have, and you'll need it. But at the same time, it is okay to ask. And when we take on graduates, and we do, we make sure we put in the right support for people, because it's not expected that everything. So yeah, I think from that point of view, it's like that one's a really key one, that I think it can almost be daunting how much tech is out there, and you see all these job adverts for specific languages and that kind of thing. But I mean, certainly at Moonpig, we don't get obsessed around that. We're just looking for good people, the right cultural fit, that kind of thing. I think that really matters.
Yeah. And again, I just couldn't agree with you more. I've just been scribbling down those notes, and again, for our listeners who they listen to our advice for more than one reason. And although it's great to hear the stories of our guests and our thoughts on emerging technology, it's always this last bit, which is the career advice and that passion. I couldn't agree with you more. To have a passion, and you're right, it doesn't need to be the perfect job, but it's got to be a company that you believe in. At least you've got to believe in what they're doing, their product, what they're creating, and that attitude to learning. And I guess for me, the other bit that comes out of that is continuous learning. So it's not learning and then stopping. It's someone who's willing to continually keep investing in themselves for the benefit of themselves as a business.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. You want to see that. And I think on the learning, and when you're coming into the industry, you're in a really fortunate position at that point, because it's really easy to try different things. So if you go into one job with one particular type of technology and you don't like that, you're at a stage in your career where you can go and do something else. You can go and do a different technology somewhere else, or even within the same organization. And I think that's really good. I mean, we've tried quite successfully with sandwich year students, actually rotating them around different technologies within the business. And then they find out what they enjoy. Maybe they want to be a iOS app developer and use that technology, or maybe they want to work in the data team, or maybe they want to be a back-end engineer. Like they start to find that. And I think that's what I would say to you, whether you can do that in a business or whether you move between places. If there's a particular technology that just doesn't interest you, you're at that really fortunate place in your career where you can just change. It becomes a little bit more, not impossible, but a little bit more difficult when you start building up a specialism in a particular skill set.
Yeah, and again, great advice, because you've that fearlessness and to be committed to things, to give it a proper try, but yet not to be afraid that if it isn't where you want to go, to make the move. So, well, Peter, that's our show coming up, and what a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for the great questions.
Well, as I say, this series is now into our third series, so it's the format works, but again, it's more on the feedback from our listeners, and I guess as I start to wrap this up, and for our STEM listeners, because the podcast is with our 17 universities now, and it can be found at arrowspodcast.com. This is the sort of stuff that we want to focus on, and your feedback is continually appreciated, and the comments that we receive through especially our Spotify channel always helps. So one more time, a massive thank you to Peter. Thank you so much for your time today.
No problem at all. Thank you very much.
And to all our listeners, that's another episode of our Future Tech podcast. I've mentioned where you can find it. It's also on Apple Play and Google, along with the career portals of our partner universities. So thank you, everybody, and here's to the next one.
Thank you for listening to Future Tech with Charlie Sell, a podcast from Arrows Group Global. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Arrows Group is a global technology recruitment and workforce solutions provider who focus on people at the heart of all our interactions. With in-depth technology expertise and global candidate communities, we offer bespoke solutions to every client and candidate. To find out more, visit arrowsgroup.com.